This is Katrin with Disability Rights New York. Welcome to our podcast, Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned. We are here to bring you information on the most relevant topics regarding disability rights and advocacy. Today we have Sarah Smith, staff attorney here at DRNY. She's going to discuss DRNY's nursing home project. Hi Sarah, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about DRNY's nursing home project and talk to us a little bit about the goals for this project?
Sure. The nursing home project really is kind of a natural response to some of the trends that we've been seeing in the PAIR program in the cases we're handling from nursing home patients and their residents and their families. And we've identified some challenges, that common kind of trends that we're seeing that we decided we'd like to sort of have a thoughtful and organized response to, and that's really why we created the nursing home project. And in terms of its goal, really, its goal is to realize the ideals of Olmsted, which is fundamentally the idea that people with disabilities, to the maximum extent possible, should be integrated into the community and the way that they live, which means that we don't want to see them in institutions to the extent that that's feasible. And what we are seeing is examples in the PAIR program of ways in which that's not happening. And people are being either the primary way that we first identified this issue was that we were seeing people who were in those nursing homes who really need not be. And the nursing homes were not working effectively to get them back into the community.
So Sarah, you just talked a little bit about the PAIR program, which is one of our programs here at DRNY. And for our audience members who aren't familiar with what that acronym is, it stands for the Protection and Advocacy for Individual Rights. And so part of that is the Olmsted decision. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know you referenced it a minute ago, but again, let's give our audience members who may not be familiar a little information on that.
Absolutely. So the Olmsted decision was a 1999 Supreme Court decision that really was a landmark moment for the community of people with disabilities, in that it was a finding that, it was a holding that basically established that people with disabilities have a very fundamental right to be integrated into the community and to live in communities and not in the community and not in institutions. The implications of that really, in terms of it being a Supreme Court decision, were that the government and public resources need to be devoted to supporting that goal. And what that means for people with disabilities is that living in an institution like a nursing home is not something that is not the only option for them ultimately. And so a lot of our work in the PAIR program is working toward realizing that goal. And the nursing home project really is evolved and developed because we began to identify barriers to that ultimate goal of having people with disabilities be integrated into the community and living in the community with the whole community, rather than being isolated in institutions that just, by definition, don't have the same capacity to provide the quality of life we all want to have.
So this nursing home project is vital as part of meeting those goals. Can you tell us about when this was established and why? Well, we just talked a little bit about why it was established, but talk to us about when it was and what steps did we go through to start this?
Well, it's interesting. The answer to those two questions are kind of entwined, when and why. And really, when we had our first meeting back in late November 2018, just fairly recently, and it was an exciting kind of moment because it was really an organic response to what we were seeing, and frankly not actually believing we were seeing, given what the law is, both in this Supreme Court decision and then the laws that exist to support the fundamental ideals of that decision, basically federal and state law that protect people with disabilities and impose some obligations on nursing homes to make sure that the promise of Olmsted is really realized. But specifically, I had a case when I believe I got the case back in October 2018 that really kind of helped us crystallize in our minds that there was some barriers that existed that we kind of kept seeing. And in this instance, what it was an elderly person who had been living in the community. He was discharged from a hospital, a New York City hospital, into a nursing home for short-term rehab for a very mild injury. And, 6 months later, she was still in that nursing home. And it was unclear why that was happening, other than, unfortunately, what from our perspective we saw was that this was a patient in a nursing home who was in a position who had the resources to cover the cost of her stay there. And that was of financial benefit to the nursing home. And so we really were encountering some great challenges in trying to get the nursing home to do what it needed to get this person home. She wanted to be home, but somehow that wasn't happening. And so this is what really galvanized us to try to better understand what was happening at the nursing home level, as well as the level of a hospital that was discharging someone to a nursing home for short-term care, when that may very well have happened as easily in their home and in the community, so that they didn't end up in the nursing home to begin with.
Wow. Now, the scope of this project seems to be pretty large. I'm assuming that there are some partners that DRNY is working with. Can you tell us a little bit about who those partners are and what roles are they playing?
Sure. Well, first of all, we have a great team here at DRNY. And at this stage, we're really focused on, again, identifying the barriers to getting people out of nursing homes whenever possible and living in the community with supports. At DRNY, we have all of the members of the PAIR team. So that's myself, Jessica Barlow, Ben Thapa, and Matt Steele. And then in addition, we've got Sim Goldman, who's just a wealth of resources, information, knowledge, and, sort of wisdom about nursing homes and the infrastructure that exists around nursing homes and the laws and the players. And so Sim is just an invaluable resource. And then also we've got Chris Swedner, who is from the REP-PAYE program. He's an analyst and has that kind of background in understanding kind of the nuts and bolts of the dollars and cents, I think would be a better way to put it, of the healthcare systems and kind of that piece that seems very apparent to us, which is that to some extent a profit motive driving the behaviors and decisions of nursing homes about whether and when to discharge their patients. And that is kind of inconsistent too often with what is in the best interest of those residents in particular. Nursing homes are making decisions that are driven by, they seem to be making decisions driven much more by profit motive than the law. And, I have to come back to what the law is, which is that we want to see people with disabilities living in an integrated way in the community to the maximum extent possible. And that doesn't mean living in a nursing home or other similar institution.
And so outside of DRNY, are there other partners that we're working with as organizations?
At this point, we are still in this information gathering phase, and we haven't reached out and established any formal partnerships, but DRNY has really strong relationships with the independent living center community, and I think, and again, I think we also will probably be reaching out both to the Long-Term Community Care Coalition. They have a wonderful array of resources and information that we are really hoping to partner with them in the future on educating both nursing home residents as well as nursing home staff about the law and their obligations under the law. Because at this point, our goal is to really, what we've identified is some really fundamental problems in the discharge planning process in nursing homes that we'd like to address. We are not seeing the law being followed in terms of meaningful discharge planning. And the way that we're seeing this manifested is in different ways. And one of the ways is in the example that I gave you earlier about my client who was living in a nursing home or stayed in a nursing home for, I believe she was admitted in June, and so well over 5 months for something that couldn't even necessarily qualify as a wrist sprain. That was the original short-term, the reason for her to be admitted for short-term rehabilitation into this nursing home. And 5.5 months later, and numerous attempts by my very feisty client who was over 90 years old, to her numerous attempts to get out of the nursing home just by simply walking out. After numerous attempts of that and a lot of really challenging advocacy on her behalf, we were able to get her home in, I believe, the last week in November. So we had identified, as I said, in that situation, a real disconnect between what her needs were and what the outcome was in terms of her living in this nursing home for 5.5 months when she had long since stopped receiving rehab for a wrist strain.
It's so great that she's home. And can you tell us a little bit about the other goals that the project is currently working towards?
Yes, absolutely. Well, another piece, as I said, was, there are these cases in which there are residents in nursing homes who are not getting back to the community when they very much want to and are very much entitled to and have actually expressed that desire, which was the one example that I gave you. But then another goal we have is to address situations in which, again, there is ineffective discharge planning, but the opposite result occurs, which is that people are discharged unsafely into unsafe situations. And most specifically, what we're seeing in our cases is people who are being discharged into homelessness when they perhaps may not even be physically well equipped enough, health wise, to manage being discharged from the nursing home. They may have some specific health needs that require them not to be put in such a vulnerable environment as a communal living situation.
Okay, so how does DRNY hope to improve client living conditions in nursing homes with this project?
Well, what we'd really like to do, and what we're at a phase of doing right now, is through our specific cases, as well as through what we're planning to do, which is we're planning to put together some surveys. What we hope to accomplish in terms of improving conditions in nursing homes is to improve the discharge planning of nursing homes and hospitals that are sending people to nursing homes in instances where they may not need to be, to really refocus and make more effective discharge planning from both of those institutions, so that we're getting people into the community wherever possible, to be living in the community with services and supports, so that they have the maximum amount of control over their own personal lives and their healthcare choices and their care.
Well, it sounds like a great project, Sarah, and we can't wait to get an update on it and see how you're doing. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Empire State of Rights Closed Captioned has been brought to you by Disability Rights New York, your source for disability rights and advocacy. If you enjoyed our program, and we hope you did, make sure to subscribe, like, and share this post. If there is a subject you would like us to discuss, please email podcast@drny.org or comment below. Tune in next time, where we'll bring you more information on disability rights in the state of New York. The closed caption version of this podcast is available on our YouTube channel.